I couldn't believe we'd actually made it. 4 years of late nights, impossible deadlines, and enough caffeine to kill a horse, all behind us now. The crackling campfire sent sparks floating up toward the night sky, illuminating the faces of my 3 best friends as we sat in a loose circle on fallen logs. To freedom! Jaden raised his beer can high, the firelight catching on his wide grin. We all lifted our drinks in response. To freedom! The clink of aluminum echoed through our little clearing in Blackwood Forest. Ryden took a careful sip from his can. You know, statistically speaking, only 62% of college graduates find employment in their field within the first year. Oh my God, Jaden groaned. Can you not be a walking Wikipedia article for 5 minutes? We're celebrating. I laughed, watching the familiar exchange. Ryden pushed his glasses up his nose, looking slightly offended, but not surprised by Jaden's reaction. This was us, the unlikely foursome who'd somehow found each other freshman year and stuck together through it all. The analytical brain, the jokester, the adventurer, and me, the storyteller. Tyler tossed another log onto the fire, sending a fresh wave of sparks into the darkness. This was a good idea, Leon. Getting away from everything for a few days. I nodded, feeling a sense of satisfaction. The camping trip had been my brainchild, a way to mark our transition from college life to whatever came next. We needed this time together before jobs and moves scattered us across the country. So, I said, leaning forward, my voice dropping slightly, did I ever tell you guys about the Blackwood Stalker? Jaden rolled his eyes dramatically. Here we go again, Leon Scott's spooky story hour. Actually, I don't think I've heard this one, Tyler said, looking interested. He always did have a thing for local legends. Ryden scooted his log closer to the fire. Is this another one of those urban legends from your grandfather? Not exactly, I said, taking a slow sip of my beer for dramatic effect. This one's been around for generations. My grandfather heard it from his father, who heard it from the locals when they first moved to the area. The forest around us seemed to grow quieter, as if listening in. Perfect timing. The trees of Blackwood Forest stood like silent sentinels, their branches reaching toward a sky speckled with stars. We were miles from the nearest town, surrounded by nothing but wilderness, the ideal setting for what I was about to share. The story goes that back in the early 1900s, there was a man who lived alone deep in these woods, I began, my voice measured and low. No one knew much about him, just that he kept to himself and was rarely seen in town. But one particularly harsh winter, game became scarce. The man was starving. I paused, looking at each of my friends in turn. Ryden was watching me with skeptical interest. Tyler was completely engrossed, his beer forgotten in his hand. Jaden was trying to look bored but wasn't quite pulling it off. They say hunger can change a person, I continued. Make them do things they'd never consider otherwise. After weeks without a proper meal, the man started to change. Not just mentally, but physically. His skin grew pale from lack of sunlight and nutrition. His eyes, they say they turned yellow like a predator's. That's not physiologically possible, Ryden interjected. Shh, Tyler hushed him. Let him finish. I smiled slightly before continuing. One day, a group of hunters came across his cabin. They found human remains. Turns out, hikers had been going missing in these parts for months. The man had been hunting them. Gross, Jaden muttered, but I noticed he'd scooted closer to the fire. The hunters tried to capture him, but he escaped into the forest. They tracked him for days, but it was like he'd become one with the woods. Some said he wasn't even human anymore, that his time alone, the starvation, the things he'd done, they'd transformed him into something else. Something that could move silently through the trees, climb like an animal, and mimic human voices to lure new prey. Mimic voices? Tyler asked, his eyebrows raised. I nodded slowly. That's how he hunts. He listens to his victims, learns their voices, their patterns of speech. Then he uses those familiar sounds to separate people from their groups. One by one. The fire popped loudly, making Jaden jump. Jesus! They call it the Blackwood Stalker now, I said. Not quite human anymore, but remembering enough about being human to be dangerous. Pale skin stretched too tight over bone. Yellow eyes that glow in the darkness. And a voice, or rather, voices, stolen from those it's killed. And let me guess, Ryden said dryly, we're camping in its hunting grounds? This whole forest is its territory, I confirmed with a solemn nod. They say you can sometimes hear it whistling at night, always the same tune, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. No one knows why that particular song, but some think it might have been something from its human life, a memory that stuck even after everything else was gone. The forest seemed unnaturally still now. Even the usual chorus of night insects had quieted. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, Jaden finally said, breaking the silence. A starving guy turned into a monster that whistles nursery rhymes? Come on. I don't know, Tyler said, looking thoughtfully into the darkness beyond our campfire. There are a lot of strange stories about these woods. People do go missing around here. People go missing in national parks all the time, Ryden pointed out. It's usually due to exposure, getting lost, or wildlife encounters. No monsters needed to explain it. I shrugged, taking another sip of my beer. I'm just telling you what I heard. Whether you believe it or not is up to you. Well, I don't, Jaden declared emphatically. It's just a story to scare kids away from wandering too deep into the... A sharp crack echoed from somewhere in the darkness behind him, cutting his sentence short. We all froze, our eyes darting to the source of the sound. What was that? Tyler whispered. Probably just an animal, Ryden said, but I noticed he was sitting much more rigidly than before. Another crack, this time from a different direction, then another. That's not an animal, Jaden said, all traces of his earlier bravado gone. That sounds like footsteps. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but my heart was racing. I told the story to set a mood, to give us all a little scare for fun. I hadn't expected the forest to provide sound effects. It's probably just the wind moving branches around, I suggested, not believing it myself. Then we heard it, faint at first but growing clearer. Whistling, the familiar tune of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star floated through the trees, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Very funny, Leon, Jaden said, his voice higher than usual. Did you set this up? Hidden speakers or something? I shook my head slowly, a chill spreading through me that had nothing to do with the night air. I didn't set anything up. The whistling stopped abruptly, leaving us in tense silence. Then it started again, from a completely different direction. A moment later, another whistling joined in from somewhere else, slightly out of sync with the first, then a third. That's not possible, Ryden whispered. There would have to be multiple people out there. Or just one that can throw its voice, Tyler suggested, his eyes wide as he scanned the tree line. This isn't funny anymore, Jaden said, standing up. Whoever's out there, we hear you. The joke's over. His voice echoed through the trees, met only by more whistling, now coming from what seemed like a complete circle around our campsite. Tyler suddenly stood up, grabbing his flashlight from beside his log. I'm going to check it out. Are you insane? I reached for his arm. That's exactly what you're not supposed to do in this situation. It's obviously someone messing with us, Tyler insisted, shaking off my hand. Probably some local kids who heard us setting up camp. I'm going to find them and tell them to knock it off. Tyler, don't, Ryden warned. Even if it is just people pranking us, wandering into the woods at night is dangerous. But Tyler was already stepping beyond the circle of firelight, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. I'll be right back. I'm just going to look around the perimeter. At least take someone with you, I urged, starting to stand up. I'll be fine, Tyler called back, already several yards away. It'll be easier to hear them if I'm alone. Before any of us could argue further, he disappeared into the trees, the bobbing beam of his flashlight the only indication of his movement. This is such a bad idea, Jaden muttered, sitting back down heavily on his log. Should we go after him? I asked, looking at Ryden. Ryden hesitated. Let's give him a few minutes. If he's not back soon, we'll all go together. The whistling had stopped when Tyler left, which only made me more uneasy. We sat in tense silence, straining to hear any sound from the forest. The minutes stretched painfully, each of us periodically checking our phones for the time. It's been almost 10 minutes, I said finally. We should go look for him. Ryden nodded, reaching for his own flashlight. You're right, this has gone on long enough. Just as we were gathering ourselves to search, a voice called out from the darkness, Tyler's voice. Guys, you need to come see this. We all looked at each other, relief washing over us. What did you find? Jaden called back. There was a pause before Tyler's voice responded. Just come here. You have to see it to believe it. Something about his tone made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was Tyler's voice, but something was off. The cadence was wrong. Too even, too measured, and there was a hollowness to it, like it was missing the natural warmth that Tyler's voice usually carried. "Where are you?" Ryden called, standing up with his flashlight ready. "Follow my voice," Tyler's voice replied flatly. "I'm not far." I stood up slowly, a growing sense of dread filling me. "Guys, I don't think that's Tyler." "What are you talking about?" "We all heard him," Jaden said, but he didn't sound convinced. "Listen to how he's speaking," I insisted quietly. "It doesn't sound right." "Guys," the voice called again, with the exact same intonation as before. "You need to come see this." Ryden's eyes met mine, and I could see he'd noticed it too. "It's like a recording," he whispered. I turned slowly, scanning the edge of our campsite with growing panic. That's when I saw it, just beyond the reach of our firelight, standing unnaturally still between two trees. A tall, thin figure, its pale skin reflecting the faint moonlight. It stood at least 7 feet tall, limbs too long and too thin to be human. And its eyes, even from this distance, I could see the yellow glow, fixed unblinkingly on us. As I stared in horror, the creature's mouth opened. "Just come here," it said in Tyler's voice, but now I could see the wrongness of it, how its mouth moved in ways that didn't match the words. "You have to see it to believe it." "Guys," I whispered, not taking my eyes off the creature. My voice came out dry and cracked. "That's not Tyler." Ryden stood frozen beside me, his glasses reflecting the firelight. "What the hell is that?" he asked, his normally measured voice trembling. Jaden backed up until he bumped against me. "Leon, tell me this is part of your stupid story." The creature took a step closer, its movements fluid but wrong, like watching someone walk underwater. Its limbs bent at angles that shouldn't be possible, each step covering more ground than seemed right. The firelight caught its face better now, revealing skin that looked waxy and stretched too tight across its skull. "Just come here," it said again in Tyler's voice, the words exactly the same as before, down to the pitch and rhythm. "You have to see it to believe it." I grabbed both Ryden and Jaden by their arms, my fingers digging in hard enough to make Jaden wince. "We need to run," I said, keeping my voice low. "The car's 50 yards away on the logging road. We make a break for it together." "What about Tyler?" Ryden asked, his eyes darting between me and the creature. "That's not Tyler," I repeated, more firmly this time. "Tyler's—" I couldn't finish the thought. My mind flashed to the real Tyler, somewhere in the dark forest. Was he still alive? Had this thing already? I pushed the thought away. We can't help him if we're dead. The creature tilted its head, the movement too sharp, like a bird. It took another step forward, now at the very edge of our firelight. I could see its eyes better, yellow and unblinking, with pupils that looked wrong, too vertical. "What is it waiting for?" Jaden whispered. "It's trying to separate us," I said, remembering my grandfather's story. "That's how it hunts." The creature's mouth suddenly stretched wider than any human mouth should, opening like a gash across its face. Tyler's voice came out again, but this time it sounded different. Desperate, afraid. "Guys, help me, please. It's right behind me." My stomach turned. It was learning, adapting Tyler's voice to sound more convincing. "The keys are in my right pocket," I said quietly. "When we run, stay together. No matter what you hear, don't look back and don't stop." Ryden nodded, his face pale. "What if it catches one of us?" "It won't," I said, with more confidence than I felt. "We're going on 3. 1. The creature took another step forward, now half in the firelight. Its skin looked almost translucent, blue veins visible beneath. 2. It opened its mouth again, this time emitting a sound that was half Tyler's voice, half something else, a high-pitched noise that made my teeth hurt. 3. We bolted. I shoved Jaden ahead of me and we crashed through the underbrush away from the campfire. The sudden darkness was disorienting after staring at the fire. I fumbled with my flashlight, clicking it on as I ran. The beam bounced wildly across trees and ground. Behind us, I heard movement. Fast. Too fast. Not the sound of someone running, but something else. Something that moved through the forest like it was made for it. "Don't stop!" I yelled, hearing Ryden and Jaden's ragged breathing ahead of me. My flashlight caught glimpses of them. Jaden's bright red jacket, Ryden's backpack bouncing as he ran. The logging road couldn't be far. We'd walked it earlier that day, joking and carrying our gear, not knowing what waited in these woods. A sound came from behind us. Not footsteps, but something sliding through the forest floor, branches snapping under impossible weight. I risked a glance back and immediately wished I hadn't. The creature moved on all fours now, its limbs bent at impossible angles, covering ground with terrifying speed. In the flashlight's beam, its eyes reflected like an animal's. "Faster!" I screamed, my voice breaking. I caught up to Ryden and Jaden just as we broke through the tree line onto the logging road. My car sat there, exactly where we'd left it, looking impossibly normal in this nightmare. "Get in!" I yelled, jamming my hand into my pocket for the keys. My fingers felt numb and clumsy and I dropped them onto the dirt. Shit! I bent down, frantically sweeping my flashlight across the ground. The keys glinted and I snatched them up. Behind us, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. Jaden reached the car first, yanking at the passenger door. "It's locked! Leon, hurry!" I jabbed at the key fob and the car's lights flashed as the doors unlocked. Jaden and Raiden threw themselves into the back seat together, not even bothering with the front passenger seat. "Start the car!" Raiden yelled, his voice higher than I'd ever heard it. I slammed into the driver's seat and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine turned over but didn't catch. Come on," I muttered, turning the key again. "Leon!" Jaden screamed, pointing through the rear window. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw it. The creature burst from the tree line, its pale form illuminated by the car's taillights. It moved with a terrible purpose, eating up the distance between us and the forest edge. I turned the key again, pumping the gas pedal. The engine sputtered, then roared to life. I slammed the car into drive and stomped on the gas. The tires spun in the loose dirt of the logging road before catching traction. "It's coming!" Raiden shouted, his face pressed against the back window. The car lurched forward, headlights cutting through the darkness ahead. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, fighting to keep the car on the narrow, rutted road. "Is it following us?" I asked, not daring to look in the mirror again. "I don't know," Jaden said, his voice shaking. "I can't see it anymore." I pressed harder on the gas, the car bouncing violently over the uneven ground. Tree branches scraped against the sides, and I winced at each sound, imagining long fingers trying to grab us. "Wait," Raiden said suddenly. "Slow down." "Are you crazy?" I shot back. "Just for a second," he insisted. "Look." I eased up on the gas slightly, enough to glance in the rearview mirror. In the red glow of the taillights, I could see the creature standing in the middle of the road where we'd left it. It wasn't chasing us. It just stood there, its two long arms hanging at its sides, watching our car grow smaller in the distance. "Why isn't it following?" Jaden asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't answer, pressing the gas pedal to the floor again. The car's engine whined in protest as we sped down the logging road, the creature's inhuman form growing smaller in the rearview mirror until it was swallowed by darkness. "What about Tyler?" Jaden asked from beside Raiden, his voice cracking. "We can't just leave him out there with that thing." I didn't answer. What could I say? We'd all heard that thing using Tyler's voice like some kind of sick puppet. The implications made my stomach turn. The car headlights cut through the dense forest on either side of us, creating strange, shifting shadows that made me flinch with every movement. Every dark space between trees looked like it might hide another creature. Every branch that swayed in the wind looked like reaching arms. "Leon, slow down before you wreck us," Raiden said, placing a hand on my shoulder from the back seat. "It's not following us. You're going to hit something." I eased up on the gas slightly, but kept my eyes darting between the road ahead and the rearview mirror. The creature had disappeared from view now, swallowed by the darkness behind us. "What the hell was that thing?" Jaden whispered. "What the actual hell was that?" None of us answered. The only sound was our heavy breathing and the car's tires crunching over gravel and dirt. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the narrow logging road widened and I spotted the reflective sign marking the intersection with the main highway. I took the turn too fast, the tires sliding slightly before finding purchase on the smooth asphalt. The sensation of hitting pavement was like breaking through to the surface after being underwater. The car stopped shaking. The engine quieted to a normal hum, and the yellow lines of the highway provided a comforting sense of civilization. Street lamps appeared intermittently along the road, pushing back the darkness. I took a deep breath, then another. My death grip on the steering wheel loosened slightly as I checked the speedometer and realized I was doing nearly 80. I eased off the gas, bringing us down to a legal speed. "Okay," I said, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. "We're okay now." "Okay?" Jaden leaned forward from the back seat. "Are you kidding me? Tyler is still out there. With that thing. We need to call the police right now." "And tell them what exactly?" Raiden asked, his analytical mind apparently kicking back in now that the immediate danger had passed. "That we saw some creature from a campfire story? That it was mimicking Tyler's voice?" "Yes," Jaden shouted. "That's exactly what we tell them. Our friend is missing and we saw something take him." "They'll think we're drunk or high," Raiden said. "We need some kind of evidence, or at least a more believable story, or they won't take us seriously." "So what? We just leave Tyler out there to die because we're worried about sounding crazy?" Jaden's voice rose higher with each word. "No, of course not," I said, trying to sound calmer than I felt. "But Raiden has a point. We need to think about how to explain this." "There's a diner up ahead," Raiden pointed to a neon sign glowing in the distance. "Pull in there. We can try calling Tyler, figure out what to tell the police." I nodded and flicked on my turn signal, though there wasn't another car in sight on the empty highway. The 24-hour diner sat just off the road, its windows glowing with warm yellow light that seemed impossibly normal after what we'd just experienced. I pulled into the parking lot and chose a spot near the front entrance, under a bright security light. I put the car in park but left the engine running, as if some part of me was ready to flee again at a moment's notice. For a long moment, none of us moved. The reality of what had happened, what we'd seen, hung heavy in the car. "Try calling him," I finally said, turning to look at Raiden and Jaden in the back seat. Raiden pulled out his phone and dialed Tyler's number, putting it on speaker. We listened to it ring once, twice, 3 times, then go to voicemail. "Hey, it's Tyler. Leave a message." The sound of his normal voice, his actual voice, made my chest tighten. "Tyler, it's Raiden. Call us back immediately, man. We're worried about you." Raiden ended the call and looked at us. Maybe he's okay. Maybe he just got lost in the woods and that, whatever it was, is something else entirely. Jaden was already shaking his head. "You saw that thing. You heard it using his voice." He snatched the phone from Raiden and dialed again. Again, it went to voicemail. "Tyler, where are you? We're at the diner on Highway 16. If you get this, call us right away." Jaden's voice cracked on the last words. I tried next, with the same result. Each time the call went to voicemail, the knot in my stomach tightened. "We need to tell the police everything," I said finally, turning off the engine. "Everything we saw, exactly how it happened. Including the part where it looked exactly like the monster from your grandfather's story?" Raiden asked, raising an eyebrow. I looked at him. "Yes, especially that part." I took a deep breath and tried to organize my thoughts. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving me shaky and exhausted, but I needed to be clear about what I'd seen. "It was tall, at least 7 feet, I began, my voice low. Thin, but not in a human way. More like stretched. Its arms were too long, hanging down past its knees, and they bent in places arms shouldn't bend." Raiden and Jaden listened silently, their faces pale in the dim light of the car. Its skin was this weird pale color, almost translucent. You could see veins underneath, blue ones. And its eyes. I swallowed hard. Yellow, with vertical pupils like a cat's. They reflected light, like animal eyes do at night. "And it spoke with Tyler's voice," Jaden added quietly. "Perfectly at first, then that screeching sound mixed in." I nodded. It was exactly like my grandfather described the Blackwood Stalker. Every detail. The way it moved, the eyes, the voice mimicry, all of it. "That's impossible," Raiden said, but his usual certainty was missing. "Legends don't just come to life." "Then what did we see?" I asked. "What happened to Tyler?" Raiden had no answer. "I'm telling you, it took him," Jaden said, his voice rising. "It got Tyler, and now he's dead. He's dead." He slammed his fist against the car window, making us all jump. "We don't know that," Raiden said, putting a hand on Jaden's shoulder. "Tyler could have gotten lost, and this thing could be something else entirely. Maybe it's some kind of local weirdo who uses the legend to scare people, a person in a costume or something." "A costume?" Jaden looked at him in disbelief. "Did you see how it moved? How it changed its voice? No human can do that." I'm just trying to find a rational explanation, Ryden said, his voice strained. Because the alternative is that there's a monster from a campfire story hunting people in Blackwood Forest, and that can't be real. It can't be. I pulled out my own phone. We need to call the police. Now. Whether they believe us or not, Tyler is missing, and that's real enough. Neither of them argued as I dialed 911. The phone rang twice before a dispatcher answered. 911, what's your emergency? I need to report a missing person, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. My friend disappeared in Blackwood Forest about an hour ago. What's your name, sir? Leon Scott. I'm with 2 other friends at the Highway Diner on Route 16. And the name of the missing person? Tyler Allen. He's 22, about 5'10", brown hair. When did you last see your friend, Mr. Scott? I glanced at Raiden and Jaden. About an hour ago. We were camping in Blackwood Forest at one of the clearings off the main logging road. We heard something in the woods, and Tyler went to check it out. He didn't come back. Had your friend been drinking or using any substances tonight? We each had 1 beer earlier, that's it. And did you search for him before leaving the area? This was where it got complicated. We couldn't. There was someone else in the woods, or something. It wasn't human. There was a pause on the line. When the dispatcher spoke again, her voice had a distinctly different tone, the kind adults use when humoring children. Could you clarify what you mean by not human, Mr. Scott? It was tall, unnaturally tall, with pale skin and yellow eyes. It could mimic Tyler's voice. It was trying to lure us into the woods. Even as I said it, I could hear how it sounded. Another pause, longer this time. Sir, are you and your friends safe right now? Yes, we're at the diner. We're fine. And you're certain your friend isn't playing a prank on you? Young men your age sometimes. This isn't a prank. I cut her off, frustration building. Something took our friend. I know how this sounds, but we all saw it. We all heard it. Mr. Scott, I'm going to dispatch an officer to your location to take a full report. In the meantime, have you tried calling your friend's cell phone? Yes, multiple times. It goes straight to voicemail. Please stay where you are. An officer will be with you shortly. I ended the call and looked at Ryden and Jaden. They're sending someone, but she didn't believe me. Not about what we saw. Of course she didn't, Ryden said quietly. I'm not sure I believe it myself, and I was there. Jaden leaned his head back against the seat, staring at the ceiling of the car. Tyler's gone, isn't he? He's really gone. I didn't answer. I couldn't. All I could think about was Tyler's voice coming from that thing's mouth, and the way its yellow eyes had locked onto mine in the rearview mirror, watching us flee into the night. The night at the diner felt endless. We sat in a booth near the window, nursing coffee we didn't want while waiting for the police. Officer Mendez had arrived about 20 minutes after my call, taking our statements with increasing skepticism as we described what we'd seen. I could tell from his expression that he thought we were either lying or hallucinating. When I mentioned the creature mimicking Tyler's voice, he'd given me a look that made me feel about 2 inches tall. We'll send a search party at first light, he'd finally said, closing his notebook. You boys should get some rest. Is there somewhere you can stay tonight? None of us wanted to go home. It felt like abandoning Tyler. But we couldn't go back to the woods either, not in the dark. So we'd checked into the Pine Ridge Motel a few miles down the highway, a shabby place with wood-paneled walls and beds that sagged in the middle. None of us slept. We just stared at the ceiling, jumping at every sound outside our room. Morning came with harsh clarity. Officer Mendez called around 7 a.m. to tell us that rangers from the Blackwood Forest Service would be leading a search party for Tyler. He asked if we'd join them to help identify any personal items they might find. Of course, I said immediately, ignoring Ryden's warning look from across the room. We'll be there. Now, as we pulled into the ranger station parking lot, the forest looked different in daylight, less menacing, more ordinary. But I knew what was in there, waiting. I knew what had taken Tyler. 2 rangers stood outside the station building. The older one, with a weathered face and salt and pepper beard, introduced himself as Ranger Collins. The younger one, a woman with her brown hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, was Ranger Martinez. You must be the boys from last night, Collins said, his eyes assessing us. Officer Mendez filled us in, said your friend went missing during your camping trip. That's right, I said. Tyler Allen. He went to check on a noise and never came back. Collins nodded. We'll do a thorough search of the area. These woods can be disorienting at night, especially if you've been drinking. "We weren't drunk," Jaden snapped. "We know what we saw." Ranger Martinez exchanged a look with Collins. "And what exactly did you see?" I hesitated, knowing how it would sound but feeling like I had to tell them. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, thin with pale skin and yellow eyes. It could mimic Tyler's voice perfectly. I watched their faces carefully. Most people would laugh or roll their eyes at such a description, but Collins and Martinez didn't. Instead, they exchanged another look, one that made my stomach drop. "Sounds like you boys have been listening to local legends," Collins said carefully. "The Blackwood Stalker," I said. "My grandfather told me stories about it when I was a kid. I always thought it was just a campfire tale until last night." At the mention of the name, both rangers stiffened slightly. Collins's face remained neutral, but I caught a flicker of something in his eyes. Recognition, maybe even fear. "Those old stories get exaggerated over time," he said, his tone dismissive but not entirely convincing. "But there are dangerous things in these woods, bears, mountain lions. It's easy for the mind to play tricks when you're scared." "This wasn't a bear," Ryden said quietly. He'd been silent until now, processing everything in that analytical way of his. "Whatever we saw, it wasn't an animal, at least not any kind I've ever seen." Collins cleared his throat. "Let's focus on finding your friend. We've got a search team ready to go. We'll start at your campsite and work outward from there." We followed the rangers to their truck, a green Forest Service vehicle with official markings. Raiden, Jaden, and I squeezed into the back seat while Collins drove, with Martinez navigating. "How long have you been rangers here?" I asked, trying to gauge how well they knew these woods. 15 years for me," Collins replied, eyes on the dirt road ahead. "Martinez here is newer, about 3 years. Have you ever had to search for missing campers before?" Collins nodded. "A few times. Usually it's day hikers who wander off trail or campers who get turned around after dark. Most times we find them within 24 hours, a little dehydrated and embarrassed." "And the other times?" Jaden asked. Collins didn't answer right away. "These are big woods," he finally said. "Sometimes people don't want to be found." The implication hung in the air. Maybe Tyler had run off on purpose. Maybe he was playing an elaborate prank. But I knew better. I'd seen the thing that took him. We turned onto the logging road that led to our campsite. In daylight, it looked so ordinary, just a rutted dirt path cutting through the trees. Hard to believe that less than 12 hours ago, we'd been fleeing down this same road in terror. "It's about a mile up," I said. "There's a clearing off to the right." Collins nodded and slowed the truck as we approached. The clearing looked smaller in daylight, less impressive than it had seemed when we'd picked it for our celebration. Our tents were still there, 3 of them set up in a rough triangle around what remained of our campfire. As we got out of the truck, I felt a chill despite the morning warmth. This place had changed for me forever. "This is where we last saw Tyler," I said, pointing to the edge of the clearing where the trees thickened. "He walked into the woods over there to check on the whistling we heard." "Whistling?" Martinez asked sharply. "Yeah," Jaden said. "Like someone was whistling, 'Twinkle, twinkle, little star,' from different directions around us. It was creepy as hell." The rangers exchanged another one of those looks that made my skin crawl. "Let's check your campsite first," Collins said, changing the subject. "See if there's anything that might give us a clue." We walked toward our abandoned camp, and I stopped short when we got close enough to see it clearly. What the hell? Our campsite was trashed. The tents weren't just standing empty. They were shredded, the fabric torn to ribbons. Our supplies were scattered everywhere, backpacks emptied, their contents strewn across the clearing. Even the logs we'd been sitting on were overturned and broken. "Did you leave it like this?" Martinez asked, though she could surely see the answer on our faces. "No," Ryden said, walking slowly toward his destroyed tent. "Everything was intact when we left. We just ran to the car and drove away." Collins pulled out a radio. "Collins to base. We're at the campsite now. Shows signs of disturbance, possibly wildlife. Continuing search for the missing camper." A crackly voice responded. "Copy that, Collins. Keep us updated." "Wildlife?" Jaden laughed without humor. "You think a bear did this?" Collins ignored him, pulling out a digital camera to photograph the scene. "Let's spread out and search the immediate area. Martinez, you take the boys and check the perimeter of the clearing. I'll examine the campsite more closely." Martinez nodded and gestured for us to follow her. Stay within sight of each other, she instructed. If you find anything at all, call out. We walked the edge of the clearing, looking for any sign of Tyler or what might have happened to him. I kept glancing into the trees, half expecting to see yellow eyes staring back at me. "Hey," Collins called suddenly. "I found something." We hurried back to where he was crouching near the fire pit. In his gloved hand was Tyler's phone. The screen cracked, but still intact. "That's Tyler's," Ryden confirmed. Collins bagged it carefully. Was he carrying anything else? A wallet? Keys? His wallet would have been in his pocket, I said. And his flashlight. He took his flashlight when he went to check the noise. Collins nodded. "Let's expand our search into the woods then. Martinez, you take that direction with..." He looked at me. "Leon," I supplied. "With Leon. I'll take the other two and go this way. Stay in radio contact." Martinez and I headed into the forest in the direction Tyler had gone the night before. The trees grew thicker here, blocking much of the sunlight. The forest floor was covered with pine needles and dead leaves, making it hard to spot footprints or signs of passage. "You really believe in the Blackwood stalker, don't you?" Martinez asked after we'd been walking for a few minutes. I glanced at her. I didn't, not until I saw it. She was quiet for a moment. "I've worked these woods for 3 years, she finally said. "I've never seen anything like what you described. But, I prompted when she didn't continue. "But I've heard things, stories from the old-timers. Collins wouldn't admit it, but there are parts of these woods where even the rangers don't go alone." My heart beat faster. "So you believe me?" She shook her head. "I'm saying I don't disbelieve you. There's a difference." We continued in silence for a while, scanning the ground and surrounding trees for any sign of Tyler or anything unusual. About 20 minutes into our search, Martinez's radio crackled. "Martinez, Collins, we found something, about 200 yards in from the northwest edge of the clearing." "Copy that," she responded. "We're heading your way." We changed direction, moving carefully through the trees until we spotted Collins, Ryden, and Jaden standing in a small space between 2 large pines. "What did you find?" I asked as we approached. Collins held up a plastic evidence bag containing what looked like broken pieces of black plastic and metal. I recognized it immediately. "That's Tyler's flashlight," I said, "or what's left of it." The flashlight was shattered, broken into several pieces as if it had been crushed. But what made my blood run cold were the marks on the remaining pieces, long, deep scratches that couldn't have been made by any normal animal. "These look like claw marks," Ryden said, voicing what we were all thinking. "Could be from a bear," Collins said, but his tone lacked conviction. "Those aren't bear claws," Martinez said quietly, examining the evidence bag. "They're too narrow, too precise." Collins shot her a warning look. "Let's not jump to conclusions. We need to expand our search. If your friend came this far in, he could have gone farther." For the next several hours, we combed the woods in an expanding grid pattern, looking for any other sign of Tyler. The rangers were thorough, professional, checking every possible hiding place, every fallen log, every thicket. But we found nothing else. No more of Tyler's belongings, no clothing, no blood, no footprints. It was as if he'd vanished into thin air after dropping his flashlight. As the afternoon wore on, I could feel everyone's energy flagging. We'd been searching for hours with nothing to show for it beyond a broken flashlight with strange claw marks. The sun was beginning to dip lower in the sky, casting longer shadows through the trees. "We should head back soon," Collins said, checking his watch. "It'll be dark in a couple of hours." "We can't just leave," I protested. "Tyler's still out here somewhere." "We'll come back tomorrow with more people," Collins assured me. "A full search team. Dogs maybe. But we need to get out of these woods before dark." The urgency in his voice was unmistakable. Whatever Collins believed or didn't believe about the Blackwood stalker, he didn't want to be in the forest after sundown. We reluctantly agreed to head back to the clearing. As we walked, the forest grew quieter. The birds that had been calling throughout the day fell silent. The air felt heavier, more still. That's when I heard it, so faint at first that I thought I was imagining it. A soft, distant whistling. The melody was unmistakable. "Twinkle, twinkle, little star." I stopped dead in my tracks. "Do you hear that?" The others halted, listening. The whistling came again, slightly louder this time, from somewhere deeper in the forest. "I hear it," Jaden said, his voice tight with fear. Collins and Martinez exchanged alarmed looks. Collins immediately grabbed his radio. "Collins to base. We're hearing unusual sounds in the search area, requesting immediate backup at the Scott campsite coordinates." The radio crackled with static before a voice responded. "Copy that. Backup is at least 30 minutes out. What's your situation?" "Potentially escalating," Collins replied cryptically. "We're evacuating the area now." He turned to us, his face grim. "We need to move. Fast. Back to the vehicles." "But Tyler," I started. "Is not our priority right now," Collins cut me off. "Getting you three safely out of these woods is. Move." We started walking quickly back toward the clearing, no longer searching the ground or surrounding trees. The whistling followed us, sometimes seeming to come from in front, sometimes from behind. It was impossible to pinpoint the source. "It's the same as last night," Ryden said quietly as we hurried along. "It's hunting us." "Just keep moving," Martinez urged, her hand resting on the holster of her sidearm. As we neared the clearing, I glanced over my shoulder and froze. Between two distant trees, barely visible in the lengthening shadows, stood a tall, thin figure. Even from this distance, I could make out the unnatural paleness of its skin and the faint yellow glow of its eyes as they reflected what remained of the daylight. It was watching us, waiting. "There!" I pointed. "Look!" Everyone turned. Jaden let out a strangled sound of fear. "I see it," he gasped. "Oh God, I see it." Before anyone could stop him, Jaden bolted, not toward the clearing where safety waited, but in the opposite direction, deeper into the woods. "Jaden!" I shouted. "Stop!" But he was already running blindly, panic driving him away from the creature but also away from our only way out. "Damn it!" I looked at Ryden. "We have to go after him." "Boys, wait!" Collins called, but we were already running after Jaden. I could hear the Rangers shouting behind us, telling us to stop, to come back. But all I could think about was Jaden running alone through these woods with that thing out there. "Jaden!" Ryden called as we ran. "Jaden, stop!" The forest grew darker as we moved deeper into it, chasing the sound of Jaden crashing through the underbrush ahead. I lost track of how far we'd gone or in what direction. All that mattered was finding Jaden before that thing did. Then I heard it, my name, called out in a voice I recognized instantly. "Leon!" Tyler's voice, coming from somewhere to my right. "Leon, help me!" Then from my left, "Leon, where are you?" And from behind, "Leon, I'm hurt." The voice was coming from multiple directions at once, surrounding us. It had Tyler's tone, Tyler's inflection, but there was something hollow about it, something wrong. It was the same unsettling quality I'd heard the night before, like listening to a perfect recording played through broken speakers. Human, but not human. Tyler, but not Tyler. "Ryden," I whispered, grabbing his arm to stop him. "Do you hear that?" He nodded, his face pale in the dimming light. "It's using Tyler's voice again, like last night." "Leon." The voice called again, this time seeming to come from directly ahead of us. "I found something. You need to see this." I rushed forward, my legs burning as I sprinted through the trees. Jaden had gotten a good head start on us, but his panicked flight had slowed as the forest grew thicker. I caught sight of his blue jacket through the branches, no longer moving. "Jaden," I called, trying to keep my voice low enough not to attract the creature but loud enough for him to hear. When I broke through the last line of trees, I found Jaden standing at the edge of a small clearing, completely still. His arms hung limp at his sides, and his eyes were fixed on something in the distance. I slowed my pace, trying to control my breathing as I approached him. "Jaden," I said again, grabbing his shoulder. "We need to go back." He didn't respond. His face looked pale, almost gray in the fading light, and a thin sheen of sweat covered his forehead despite the cool evening air. His eyes remained locked on the far side of the clearing. "What is it?" I asked, following his gaze but seeing nothing except more trees and undergrowth. "What do you see?" Before he could answer, Ryden stumbled out of the forest behind us, doubled over and gasping for breath. He wasn't built for sprinting through the woods like this. "You guys can't just run off like that," he wheezed, hands on his knees. "The Rangers. Where are the Rangers?" I turned in a full circle, scanning the trees around us. The forest had changed somehow. The trees seemed closer together, the shadows deeper. I couldn't see any sign of the path we'd taken or hear Collins or Martinez calling for us. I don't know, I admitted. I was focused on catching Jaden. Ryden straightened up, his breathing still heavy but more controlled. We need to get back to them. I nodded and turned back to Jaden, who still hadn't moved or spoken. I shook his shoulder harder this time. Jaden, hey, what's wrong? He blinked slowly, like someone waking from a trance. I thought I saw Tyler. A chill ran down my back. Where? Over there. He pointed toward a dense patch of trees on the far side of the clearing, but then he was gone. Ryden moved to stand beside us, looking where Jaden pointed. There's nothing there now. We need to find the Rangers, I said. Which way did we come from? We all turned to look back the way we'd come, but the forest looked the same in every direction, endless trees stretching into deepening shadow. I hadn't been paying attention to landmarks while chasing after Jaden, and now I realized we'd made a terrible mistake. I think it was that way, Ryden said, pointing to our left. We were heading northwest from the campsite, so we need to go southeast to get back. Do you have a compass? I asked. Ryden shook his head. No, but... He pulled out his phone. I've got GPS. He tapped at his screen, then frowned. No signal, but the compass app still works. He showed us the screen where a digital compass needle spun lazily, unable to find north. That's not right, he muttered, tapping the screen again. It should still work even without signal. I pulled out my own phone. The signal bars showed nothing, and my compass app behaved the same way, the needle spinning continuously as if confused. Try calling the Rangers, Jaden suggested, his voice barely above a whisper. I tried, but the call wouldn't go through. The forest had fallen completely silent around us. No birds, no insects, not even the sound of wind through the leaves. The only noise was our breathing and the soft crunch of leaves beneath our feet. We need to move, I said. It's getting dark fast. The light was indeed fading quickly. The sun must have dipped below the tree line, casting the forest into premature night. I turned on my phone's flashlight, and Ryden and Jaden did the same. 3 beams of light cut through the growing darkness, creating more shadows than they eliminated. Let's head this way, I suggested, pointing in what I hoped was the direction of the campsite. If we can find the logging road, we can follow it back. We moved together, staying close enough that our shoulders occasionally brushed. None of us wanted to admit it, but we were lost and something was wrong with these woods. The silence felt heavy, pressing in on us from all sides. We walked for what seemed like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. The trees never thinned, the darkness grew deeper, and our phone flashlight seemed to grow dimmer with each passing minute. We should have hit the logging road by now, Ryden said, his voice tight with worry. Maybe we went the wrong way, Jaden suggested. I was about to respond when my light caught something ahead, a dark opening in the side of a small hill, partially hidden by hanging vines and roots. Hold up, I said, stopping. Do you see that? Ryden and Jaden pointed their lights in the same direction. Is that a cave? Jaden asked. I don't remember any caves near our campsite, I said, frowning. We've been camping in these woods before, and I've never seen this. Maybe we're in a different part of the forest than we thought, Ryden suggested. I stepped closer, drawn to the cave entrance despite the warning bells going off in my head. Something about it felt wrong, but I couldn't look away. The opening was about 6 feet tall and nearly as wide, a perfect arch as if it had been carved rather than formed naturally. We should check it out, I heard myself say. Maybe there's a way through to the other side of the hill. Are you crazy? Ryden grabbed my arm. We're not going in there. We're lost, I pointed out. It's getting darker by the minute. If this goes through to the other side, it might save us hours of walking. And if it doesn't? Ryden asked. Then we turn around and come back out. Jaden moved past both of us, his flashlight beam already disappearing into the darkness of the cave. I'm going in. Jaden, Ryden called, but Jaden was already stepping through the entrance. I pulled my arm free from Ryden's grip. We can't let him go alone. Ryden cursed under his breath, but followed as I ducked into the cave after Jaden. The air inside was cold and damp, with a musty smell that made me wrinkle my nose. Our flashlight beams revealed a tunnel that extended about 20 feet before opening into a wider chamber. The walls were smooth in some places, rough in others, as if parts had been worn down by something repeatedly brushing against them. Jaden, wait up, I called, my voice echoing slightly in the confined space. He stood at the entrance to the larger chamber, his flashlight beam dancing across the walls. When I reached him, I saw why he'd stopped. The chamber was roughly circular, about 15 feet across, with a ceiling that rose to a dome about 10 feet high. But it wasn't the shape that made my skin crawl. It was what covered the floor. Scattered across the dirt were personal belongings: a torn backpack, a single hiking boot caked with dried mud, a broken pair of sunglasses, and scraps of clothing in various states of decay. Some items looked relatively new, while others were so weathered and dirt-covered they must have been there for months, maybe years. "What is this place?" Jaden whispered, his beam landing on a tattered flannel shirt. Ryden stepped up beside us, his light joining ours to illuminate more of the disturbing collection. "We need to leave, now." I moved forward instead, drawn to something that had caught the edge of my light. A small object glinted dully near the center of the chamber. I stepped carefully around the scattered items, my flashlight fixed on that metallic reflection. When I got closer, I felt my stomach drop. Lying half buried in the dirt was a watch, a distinctive silver chronograph with a navy blue face. I'd seen it nearly every day for the past 4 years. "That's Tyler's watch," I said, my voice barely audible even to myself. Ryden and Jaden moved up behind me, their lights confirming what I already knew. The watch Tyler's parents had given him for his 20th birthday, the one he wore everywhere, was lying discarded in this hidden cave. I knelt and picked it up with trembling fingers. The crystal was cracked, and the second hand no longer moved, but it was unmistakably his. The initials TA were engraved on the back, just as I remembered. "He's dead, isn't he?" Jaden's voice cracked. "That thing killed him." Ryden had moved to examine some of the other items. "These aren't all from one person. Look at this." He held up a driver's license, the photo and name partially obscured by dirt. "This is from someone named Michael Graves, and this backpack has a different name tag, Sarah something." "How many people?" I asked, still clutching Tyler's watch. "I don't know. A lot." Ryden's light swept across the chamber. "This isn't recent. This has been happening for years." A cold realization washed over me. "It's a collection. These are trophies. Like my grandfather said," I continued, my voice hollow, "it hunts people. It's been doing it for decades." The air in the cave suddenly felt colder, heavier. The silence that had followed us through the forest seemed to deepen, pressing against my eardrums until I could hear my own heartbeat. Then Jaden gasped, his flashlight beam fixed on the cave entrance behind us. I turned slowly, already knowing what I would see, but hoping desperately I was wrong. The entrance was blocked by a tall, thin silhouette, impossibly tall, with limbs that hung too long and bent at unnatural angles. In the darkness, its pale skin seemed to glow faintly, reflecting our flashlight beams like waxy paper, and its eyes, those vertical pupilled yellow eyes, gleamed with an intelligence that was both ancient and alien. We were trapped in its lair. None of us moved. None of us breathed. The creature remained motionless in the entrance, its head tilted slightly as it studied us with those terrible eyes. Then it opened its mouth, too wide, stretching beyond what any human jaw could manage, and spoke. "Leon." It was my voice, perfectly replicated down to the slight crack on the second syllable of my name that happened when I was nervous. "What are we doing here?" I felt my blood freeze in my veins. Hearing my own voice coming from that thing was more terrifying than I could have imagined. It tilted its head the other way and spoke again, this time in Jaden's voice. "I'm scared, guys. I think we're going to die here." The imitation was flawless. The slight tremor, the pitch, even the way Jaden's voice always rose slightly at the end of sentences. "Stop," Ryden whispered, his real voice shaking. The creature's mouth stretched into what might have been a smile on a human face, but on its features looked like a grotesque tear across its face. "Stop," it repeated in Ryden's voice, adding a mocking tone that Ryden himself hadn't used. Then in rapid succession, it cycled through all of our voices in a disorienting chorus. "We're trapped," my voice said. "It's going to kill us," Jaden's voice added. "We shouldn't have come here," Ryden's voice finished. The voices overlapped, creating a nightmarish blend of familiar tones saying horrible things, things we were thinking but hadn't spoken aloud. "It's in our heads," I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "It knows what we're thinking." The creature took a step forward, its movements fluid yet wrong, like watching someone move underwater. its limbs bent at impossible angles, carrying it into the chamber without seeming to actually walk. Raiden made a strangled sound beside me, and I turned to see his face contorted with fear and rage. Before I could stop him, he lunged forward, charging directly at the creature. "Raiden, no!" I shouted, reaching for him but missing. The creature moved so fast it seemed to blur. One moment it was near the entrance. The next it had Raiden by the throat, lifting him off the ground with one impossibly long arm. Raiden kicked and clawed at the creature's wrist, his flashlight falling to the ground and rolling away. "Let him go!" Jaden screamed, but neither of us moved, frozen in horror. The creature studied Raiden for a moment, its yellow eyes unblinking. Then it spoke again, using Tyler's voice this time. "I found something you need to see." With that, it stepped backward into the tunnel, dragging Raiden with it. Raiden's scream echoed through the cave as the creature pulled him into the darkness beyond our flashlight beams. The sound grew fainter, more desperate, until it was cut off completely. I stood there with Jaden, both of us shaking, as Raiden's flashlight beam slowly dimmed on the cave floor where he had dropped it. I grabbed Jaden's arm, feeling him trembling beneath my grip. Or maybe I was the one trembling. It was hard to tell when every part of me felt disconnected from reality. "We need to move," I whispered, my voice barely audible even to myself. "Now." Jaden didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the spot where Raiden had vanished, his mouth hanging open slightly. The shock had paralyzed him. I shook his arm roughly. "Jaden, we can't stay here. It'll come back." That seemed to break through. He blinked rapidly and looked at me, his eyes wide with terror. "What about Raiden? We can't just—" "It's too late," I said, the words burning my throat as they came out. "We can't help him if we're dead too." I started pulling him away from the tunnel where the creature had disappeared with Raiden. My flashlight beam bounced wildly across the cave walls as we moved, creating dancing shadows that made my heart skip with each flicker. Every dark corner seemed to hide yellow eyes watching us. "Where are we going?" Jaden asked, his voice cracking. "Good question. The way we came in wasn't an option. The creature could be circling back that way. We needed another exit." I swept my flashlight around the chamber, searching desperately for any opening, any possibility of escape. That's when I spotted it. A narrow gap at the back of the cave, partially hidden behind a rock formation. It looked tight, maybe too tight, but it was our only chance. "There," I said, pointing my light at the opening. "That might lead somewhere else." Jaden followed my beam and shook his head. "You don't know where that goes. It could be a dead end." "You want to go back the way we came?" I asked, already knowing the answer. He didn't respond, which was answer enough. We hurried toward the back of the cave, our footsteps echoing on the stone floor. As we got closer to the narrow passage, I heard something that made my blood freeze, Tyler's voice coming from the tunnel where Raiden had been taken. "Leon, Jaden, help me, please. I'm hurt." The voice was perfect, the exact cadence and tone that Tyler would use if he were injured and scared. But we knew better now. We knew what was really calling to us. "Don't listen," I said to Jaden, gripping his arm tighter. "It's not him." We reached the narrow passage. Up close, it looked even tighter than I'd thought, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. I shined my light inside, revealing a tunnel that curved away into darkness after about 10 feet. There was no way to tell where it led or if it even went anywhere at all. "I'll go first," I said, already dropping to my knees. "If I get stuck or it's a dead end, we'll try something else." Before I could enter the passage, another voice called out from behind us. This time, it was Raiden's. "Guys, where are you? I got away, but I'm lost. Can you hear me?" Jaden's head whipped around toward the sound. It's not him," I said firmly, grabbing Jaden's shoulders and forcing him to look at me. "Remember what happened to Raiden? We just saw it take him. That thing is using his voice now, just like it used Tyler's. Don't listen to it." The realization dawned on his face, followed by a fresh wave of horror. The creature now had two voices to use against us, Tyler's and Raiden's. Two friends calling for help that we had to ignore. "Leon, Jaden, where are you guys?" Raiden's voice called again, sounding closer this time. I pushed Jaden toward the narrow passage. "Go, now." He hesitated for just a moment, then dropped to his hands and knees and began crawling into the tunnel. I kept my flashlight trained on the main cave, watching for any sign of the creature while Jaden squeezed into the passage. "It's tight," he grunted, "but I can fit." I glanced back to see him wriggling forward on his stomach, the passage barely accommodating his shoulders. Once he was a few feet in, I got down and prepared to follow. That's when both voices called out simultaneously from different parts of the cave. "Leon, wait for me!" Tyler's voice from the left. "Don't leave me here!" Ryden's voice from the right. The sound of their overlapping voices was unnatural, like a broken stereo playing two recordings at once. I could hear the subtle wrongness in them now. The lack of breath, the too perfect pronunciation, the absence of the little vocal quirks that made them human. I crawled into the passage after Jaden, my chest scraping against the rough stone floor. The tunnel was claustrophobically tight, forcing me to pull myself forward with my elbows while pushing with my toes. My backpack caught on an outcropping of rock and I had to wriggle to free myself. "Hurry!" Jaden called from ahead, his voice muffled by the confines of the passage. I could hear the voices getting louder behind us, mixing together in an eerie chorus that echoed through the cave. Then came a sound I hadn't heard before, a high-pitched, inhuman screech that made the hair on my neck stand up. It was angry. We were escaping. The passage curved sharply to the right, then dipped downward. I followed Jaden's feet, trying to ignore the growing discomfort in my chest and shoulders as the tunnel pressed in from all sides. My flashlight beam bounced off the stone walls, casting strange shadows that seemed to move on their own. "I think it opens up ahead," Jaden called back, his voice tight with effort. I hoped he was right. The air in the passage was growing stale, and the weight of the mountain above us seemed to press down heavier with each passing second. The voices had faded behind us, but that didn't mean we were safe. After what felt like an eternity of crawling, the passage widened slightly, allowing me to raise my head a bit. I could see Jaden's form ahead, no longer crawling but crouched in a slightly larger space. "There's a chamber up ahead," he said, looking back at me. "I can hear water." I pushed forward, eager to escape the confines of the tunnel. As I reached Jaden, the passage opened into a small underground chamber, not nearly as large as the one we'd left, but big enough to stand upright. A narrow stream of water trickled along one wall, disappearing into a crack in the floor. But what caught my attention immediately was a shaft of pale light coming from above. I looked up and saw a small opening in the ceiling, maybe 10 feet overhead. Moonlight streamed through it, illuminating the chamber with a soft glow. "There's our way out," I said, relief washing over me. Jaden followed my gaze upward. "How do we reach it?" I scanned the chamber, looking for handholds or any way to climb up to the opening. The walls were mostly smooth, but one side had enough irregularities that it might be possible to scale it. "I think we can climb that wall," I said, pointing to the rougher section, "and I'll boost you up first." We moved to the wall and examined it more closely. There were enough protrusions and cracks to make climbing possible, though not easy. I went first, testing each handhold carefully before putting my weight on it. The rock was damp and slippery in places, making the climb treacherous. I made it about halfway up before stopping at a relatively stable position. "Okay, I'll brace myself here. You climb up to me, and I'll boost you the rest of the way." Jaden nodded and began climbing. He was heavier than he looked, and I heard him grunt with effort as he pulled himself up. When he reached me, I locked my legs against the wall and cupped my hands to form a step. "Put your foot here and I'll push you up," I instructed. He placed his foot in my hands and I pushed upward with all my strength. He grabbed for the higher handholds, using the boost to reach them. For a moment, I thought he might fall, but he managed to secure his grip and continued climbing. "I'm at the opening," he called down after a few more seconds of climbing. "It's bigger than it looks from below. I think I can fit through." I watched as he pulled himself up and out of sight. A moment later, his face appeared in the opening above. "I'm through. It leads to the forest outside," he called down, his voice tinged with relief. "Give me your hand and I'll pull you up." I climbed as high as I could, stretching my arm up toward the opening. Jaden reached down and our hands clasped. With his help, I pulled myself the rest of the way up, my muscles straining with the effort. Finally, I squeezed through the opening and collapsed onto the forest floor beside Jaden. We were both breathing heavily, covered in dirt and sweat, but alive. The moon hung high above us, bathing the forest in silver light. We were in a different part of the woods than where we'd entered the cave. Nothing looked familiar. "Which way do we go?" Jaden asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I stood up, trying to get my bearings. The forest stretched out in all directions, dark and forbidding. But then I spotted something in the distance, tiny points of light through the trees. "There," I said, pointing. "Those have to be lights from the ranger station." Without waiting for a response, I started running toward the lights, Jaden close behind me. We crashed through underbrush and leaped over fallen logs, driven by pure adrenaline and the desperate need to escape the forest. The lights grew larger as we approached, and I could make out the shapes of buildings. We were almost there. My lungs burned and my legs felt like they might give out at any moment, but I pushed on. Finally, we burst from the tree line into a clearing. The ranger station stood about 100 yards away, its windows glowing with warm light. A park ranger vehicle was just pulling into the lot, headlights sweeping across the ground. "There!" I shouted, waving my arms frantically. "Hey, over here!" The vehicle stopped, and the headlights turned toward us. I grabbed Jaden's arm, and we stumbled forward, waving and shouting until the driver spotted us. The truck accelerated in our direction, and I nearly collapsed with relief when I recognized Ranger Collins behind the wheel. He skidded to a stop beside us and jumped out, his face a mask of concern. What the hell happened? Where are the others? I couldn't find the words to answer him. Now that we were safe, the full weight of what had happened crashed down on me. Tyler and Raiden were gone, taken by that thing in the forest, that thing that wasn't supposed to exist. Collins helped us into the truck and drove us to the ranger station. The building was buzzing with activity, rangers talking on radios, maps spread out on tables, search gear being assembled. They'd been looking for us. I was led to a small office where I gave my statement to a ranger I hadn't met before. I told them everything, about the creature, about how it had taken Raiden, about our escape through the cave. The ranger wrote it all down without comment, his face unreadable. Jaden sat in a chair in the corner, wrapped in a blanket someone had given him. He hadn't spoken since we reached the station. His eyes were vacant, staring at nothing. I knew he was in shock. Hell, I probably was too, but somehow I managed to keep talking, to keep explaining what had happened. The Rangers organized a larger search party. I heard them discussing routes, equipment, firearms. They were taking it seriously now at least. But as I watched them prepare, I knew the truth that they didn't. They wouldn't find Tyler or Raiden, not alive anyway. The creature had them, just like it had probably taken countless others over the years. People who went into those woods and never came out. People whose disappearances fed the legend of the Blackwood Stalker. I sat there in that office watching the Rangers prepare their search and made a silent promise to myself. I would never set foot in Blackwood Forest again, not for any reason, and I would carry the burden of knowing what really happened to my friends, knowing that the creature was still out there in those woods, waiting for its next victims.